I was standing in line at the Atlanta airport, suitcase by my side, boarding pass on my phone, and a heart full of excitement. My son Melvin had asked me to fly out to Dallas to help him and his wife, Stephanie, with the kids for a few weeks. I had my travel outfit ready, comfortable shoes, my blue cardigan, and the necklace my granddaughter, Lacey, made for me last Christmas. I hadn't been to Texas in years, and I was looking forward to some time with my family. Just as I was about to board, my phone buzzed. I smiled, thinking it was Melvin texting to say he couldn't wait to see me. But when I opened the message, my smile froze. "Mom, can you make it 2 months instead of a few weeks? Steph got a new job, and we'll really need you full-time." I read it twice, then 3 times. 2 months? Full-time? I blinked at the words, wondering if I was misunderstanding. The woman standing next to me in line must have noticed my face. She asked, "Everything okay, honey?" I nodded, even though it wasn't. "Yes, just a little change of plans," I said, forcing a smile. The flight attendant called our group to board, and I moved forward, but my heart was suddenly heavy. I wasn't sure what I'd just agreed to. On the plane, I tried to calm myself. "It's just a couple of months," I told myself. "They're busy and the kids are young. You can help out and spend time with your grandbabies." I had spent 40 years as a pediatric nurse before retiring last year. I was used to helping, used to being needed. That's what mothers do, right? When your children ask for help, you say yes. It's part of the job description, though no one ever writes that part down. Still, something about that message didn't sit right. 2 months wasn't a visit, it was a stay. And full-time didn't sound like family time. It sounded like work. I stared out the plane window as we took off, the Atlanta skyline shrinking beneath the clouds. My hands rested on my lap, but my mind was spinning. I hadn't even asked about details, sleeping arrangements, schedules, what exactly they expected me to do. I just assumed it would be like old times, helping with dinner, reading bedtime stories, spoiling the kids a little too much. But somewhere deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "This time feels different." When I landed in Dallas, Melvin was waiting near baggage claim with his 2 kids, Lacey, 7, and Eli, 5. They ran into my arms, and for a moment, all my worries melted away. "Grandma, you came?" Lacey squealed, holding onto my neck. "Of course I did," I said, kissing her cheek. "You think I'd miss time with my favorite people?" Melvin hugged me next. "Thanks again, Mom. You're really saving us." I laughed lightly. "It's just a few weeks, Mel. I'll be back before you know it." He hesitated before answering. "Yeah, about that, we'll talk at home." That uneasy feeling came rushing back. Their home was in Plano, one of those big, planned neighborhoods with perfect lawns and wide driveways. Inside, the house was bright, modern, and spotless. Stephanie greeted me with a quick hug. "Carol, so glad you made it. Sorry I couldn't pick you up. Work emergency." "No problem at all," I said, though she already seemed distracted. Dinner that night was quick, takeout and small talk. Between the laughter of the kids and the chatter about work, I noticed something. Every time I mentioned my return flight, Melvin and Stephanie changed the subject. Finally, as we cleared the table, Melvin said it directly. "Mom, about your stay. We were hoping you could stay through the end of next month. Steph's new project has her working late hours, and the daycare wait list is insane. We figured you could help with pickups, meals, and bedtime. Just until we get settled." I tried to keep my face calm, though my stomach turned. "That's longer than I expected. Honey." He smiled the way adult children smile when they want something. "I know, Mom, but no one's better with the kids than you. You'll make it fun for them, and we'll cover your expenses while you're here." "Expenses?" I asked. "Groceries, gas if you need it, that kind of thing," Stephanie added. I nodded slowly. So, no salary? Just help. They both laughed softly, as if I'd told a joke. Mom, it's family. Of course not, Melvin said. We'd never hire you. I smiled politely, but my chest felt tight. After dinner, I went to the guest room, a cozy space off the hallway. The kids had drawn a "Welcome Grandma" sign taped to the wall. It warmed my heart, but underneath it, I felt something else. I sat on the bed and stared at my phone. My friends back in Atlanta had invited me to a senior yoga retreat in Savannah that same month. I'd said no because I thought family came first. Now, I wasn't sure what family meant anymore. The next morning, I woke early to the sound of little feet running in the hallway. Stephanie had already left for work. Melvin was in his suit, rushing out the door. Love you, Mom. Breakfast stuff's in the fridge. Oh, and can you take Lacey to ballet at 4? Of course, I said automatically, even as he was halfway out the door. By 9 a.m., I'd cooked breakfast, cleaned up the kitchen, dressed the kids, and started laundry. I realized I hadn't even brushed my own hair yet. At lunchtime, Lacey asked, Grandma, are you staying forever? I smiled gently. No, sweetheart, just helping for a little while. Mom says you're our new babysitter, she said matter-of-factly, chewing her sandwich. I froze. She said that. Yeah, Daddy said you're the best one because you're free. I didn't respond. I just kept cutting the crust off her sandwich, my hands trembling slightly. That night, after I tucked the kids into bed, I sat in the guest room with a cup of tea, staring at the message Melvin had sent at the airport. 2 months. Full time. I had said yes because I love them. But love, I realized, had turned into labor, quiet, unpaid, and unseen. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just helping. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. And as I turned off the light, one thought echoed in my mind. I hadn't been invited for a visit. I'd been hired for a job, one I never applied for, and one I wasn't sure I wanted. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't flying into a family visit. I was flying into a job interview I never agreed to. The next morning started before sunrise. I could hear the coffee maker already gurgling in the kitchen. Melvin was dressed, briefcase in hand, scrolling through his phone while half listening to the news. Stephanie was in workout clothes, moving fast between the pantry and her laptop on the counter. Morning, Mom, Melvin said without looking up. Kids are still asleep. There's cereal if they wake before Steph leaves. I smiled politely, though he was already out the door. Stephanie glanced up for a second. Thanks again for being here, Carol. We'd be lost without you. I'll be back late, presentation day. Of course, I said. Good luck. And just like that, I was alone in the house with 2 sleeping children and a long, quiet morning ahead. I made myself some tea, sat by the window, and tried to picture what the next few weeks would look like. Maybe I could bake cookies with Lacey, take Eli to the park, cook family dinners. I had always been the kind of mother who showed love through doing. Helping came naturally to me. But by the 3rd day, I realized this wasn't going to be a visit filled with memories. It was a schedule. Stephanie left a note on the counter one morning. It wasn't unkind, just detailed, almost too detailed. Mom, Lacey's school lunch in the blue box. Eli's snack at 10. Laundry in the guest room needs folding. Please don't forget dance pickup at 4. Dinner can be the casserole in the fridge. Thank you. At the bottom was a smiley face, but it felt like a signature from a boss. By noon, I had done everything on that list. The kids were good, but full of energy. I was running after them, cleaning up, fixing meals, washing clothes. When Melvin came home that evening, he smiled and said, "You still got it, Mom. The house looks great." I smiled back, but inside, something didn't sit right. I hadn't come here to prove I still had it. I came to be with my family. The next few days rolled into one long blur. Stephanie's thank yous came at predictable moments, like clocking in and out of politeness. You're a lifesaver, Carol. We're so lucky you're here. Always said while walking out the door. One night, I sat on the back porch, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the faint laughter of neighbors down the street. I thought about my life back in Atlanta, my small apartment, my garden, my book club, quiet things that made me feel like me. Here, my days revolved around nap times, laundry, and school drop-offs. It wasn't that I didn't love the kids. I adored them. But there's a difference between helping and being used. Stephanie came home late that evening, heels in one hand, exhaustion written all over her face. Carol, you're amazing. I don't know how we'd survive without you. She kissed me on the cheek, then went straight upstairs without another word. I stared at the sink full of dishes and whispered to myself, apparently, that's how. Day 7 brought a new addition, an apron. It was hanging on the kitchen chair when I came down for breakfast, blue with flowers and a sticky note attached. For Grandma, so you don't ruin your clothes. Smiley face. It should have been sweet, but something about that little smiley face made me feel small. I slipped it on anyway. I told myself it was practical, but deep down, it felt like a uniform. Around lunchtime, Stephanie called from work. Mom, could you add a few things to your day? The cleaner canceled, and the kids' bathroom needs some attention. I know you don't mind. You're so much better at keeping things tidy. I wanted to say, actually, I do mind. But instead, I said, sure thing, honey. Years of being the peacemaker had trained me well. After hanging up, I looked around the kitchen. Toys on the floor, dishes stacked high, laundry basket full. I felt like I was running a small daycare, not visiting my family. That night, after the kids were asleep, Melvin sat at the kitchen counter doing emails. Mom, he said without looking up, you have no idea how grateful we are. We're saving a fortune, not having to hire help. I froze. Saving a fortune. He said it casually, almost proudly, not realizing how the words landed. Glad I can help, I said, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. He smiled, still typing. You always were the best, Mom. A few days later, I overheard Stephanie on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. Her voice carried through the hallway. Oh, it's been great, she said to someone. We don't have to pay for daycare or a housekeeper. My mother-in-law is staying for a while. Total blessing. It's saving us thousands. Thousands? That word echoed in my head the rest of the night. When she hung up, she came into the kitchen all smiles. I bragged about you at work today. Carol, everyone's jealous. I nodded politely, stirring a pot of soup. That's so. Oh, yes. Most people don't have mothers-in-law willing to help this much. Help, I repeated softly. She didn't notice. Anyway, I'm running late tomorrow. Can you drop the kids at school and then pick up dry cleaning? I wanted to say, I didn't come here to run your errands. But my mouth betrayed me. Sure. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sound of the air conditioner clicked on and off. The guest room felt smaller somehow. My body ached from bending, lifting, cleaning. When I finally drifted off to sleep, I dreamed I was back at the hospital, except I wasn't getting paid. A week later, I tried to talk to Melvin about it gently. Son, I just want to make sure you understand. I'm here to help, not to take over everything. He smiled like he was humoring me. Mom, you're overthinking it. We're family. You've always been the backbone. You love being around the kids. You're a natural caregiver. He meant it as praise. But all I heard was, you're a tool we depend on. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since retiring. I love them, But when did love become labor? I looked around the room that had been called the guest room, but no longer felt like one. The thank yous sounded like excuses. The hugs felt like paychecks that never cleared. The apron on the chair wasn't a gift anymore. It was a symbol. They didn't need their mother. They needed an employee they didn't have to pay. The next few weeks rolled in like one long, never-ending day. My mornings started before sunrise and ended long after the house went quiet. By 7, the kids were awake, hungry, and arguing over cereal. By 8, I packed lunches, ironed clothes, and walked them to school. By 10, I was cleaning up the breakfast mess and starting laundry. Melvin left for work before I finished my first cup of coffee. Stephanie rushed out right after him, phone in hand, already talking to someone from her office. The words were always the same. Thanks again, Carol. You're such a lifesaver. They said it like a script, practiced and polite, but it never sounded real. I didn't complain, but inside, I felt myself slipping into old habits, the ones that made me believe being useful was the same as being loved. I told myself I was doing what mothers do, but the truth was I was doing what no one else wanted to. By the 3rd week, my body ached. I hadn't had a day to myself since I arrived. The kids were sweet, but they were also a handful. Eli threw tantrums at bedtime, and Lacey needed help with school projects that somehow became my responsibility. I didn't mind the chaos. I minded being expected to handle it all alone. One Friday morning, Melvin announced they were taking a weekend getaway. He said it like it was a doctor's order. Mom, you're okay with the kids for a couple days, right? We really need this. Steph's been under so much pressure. I looked at him. A couple of days? Without any notice. He smiled the same boyish smile he used to use when he wanted to borrow the car. You love being with them. They'll behave for you. Stephanie chimed in as she wheeled her suitcase toward the door. There's food in the fridge, and I left a card for emergencies. We'll be back Sunday night. Thank you so much, Carol. You're the best. The door shut, and the house fell quiet except for the sound of cartoons from the living room. I stood there with a dish towel in my hand, realizing they hadn't asked, they had assumed. That weekend was long. The kids woke up at dawn, full of energy. I tried to make it fun, baked cookies, played board games, even built a fort in the living room. But by Saturday night, my back hurt, my patience was thin, and my phone was full of unanswered texts from friends back home. Come to brunch when you get back. One friend wrote, you deserve a break. Break. I laughed out loud. I didn't remember the last time I'd had one. Sunday evening came, and the door opened to laughter and shopping bags. Stephanie dropped a pile of laundry in the hallway. We brought souvenirs for the kids. Melvin kissed me on the cheek. How was it? Everything go okay? It went fine, I said. My voice was flat, even to my own ears. See, we knew you'd handle it, he said, smiling. They never noticed how tired I looked or how I sat down slowly to hide the pain in my legs. A few days later, I overheard something that cut deeper than I expected. Stephanie was on a video call in the kitchen. I was in the laundry room, folding towels, but her voice carried. Oh, it's been amazing, she said. We're saving so much money. Who needs a nanny when you have a grandma? There was laughter on the other end. Stephanie laughed too. I stopped folding. My hands froze midair, holding one of Eli's shirts. She said it lightly, but it landed heavy. Who needs a nanny when you have a grandma? It was meant as a joke, but jokes always carry a little truth. I stood there listening to her talk about me, like I was a budget line on their spreadsheet. Saving money, convenient, reliable. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, but enough to change how I saw everything. That night at dinner, I watched them both. Melvin was scrolling through his phone between bites. Stephanie talked about her promotion. Neither asked how I was. Lacey told me about her art project, and I smiled, grateful for the only genuine conversation at the table. When the kids went to bed, I started cleaning the kitchen. Stephanie walked by and said, "Oh, you don't have to do that," but she kept walking upstairs while I finished wiping the counters. Later, I sat in the dark living room. The glow of the dishwasher, the only light. I thought about my old life, how I used to dream of retirement meaning freedom, lunches with friends, reading in the park, maybe taking a road trip. Instead, here I was running a household that wasn't mine. I realized something simple but painful. Being needed wasn't the same as being valued. Melvin and Stephanie said thank you out of habit, not gratitude. They treated my help like a given, not a gift. I started keeping small notes in my journal again, mostly to keep my mind steady. I'm helping, but I don't feel part of anything. Another night I wrote, I've become invisible in my own family. One morning, while making pancakes, Eli tugged at my apron and asked, "Grandma, do you live here now?" I laughed softly. "No, sweetie, just visiting." He frowned. "But Mom says you live here now because you help with everything." I looked down at him and didn't know what to say. Kids don't lie. They repeat what they hear. When he ran off to play, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't even entirely Melvin's or Stephanie's fault. I had allowed it. I had agreed to help, and I never drew a line. But I was beginning to understand that lines matter. That evening, after the kids went to bed, I overheard another conversation. Melvin was telling Stephanie about a co-worker who hired a live-in nanny. "She's paying almost $5,000 a month," he said, laughing. "Can you imagine? We'd never afford that." Stephanie replied, "Exactly. That's why I say we're lucky. Mom's here. We should do something nice for her when she leaves. Maybe a spa gift card or something." I felt my stomach twist. A gift card. For 2 months of unpaid work. I quietly walked upstairs, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. I could hear their muffled voices downstairs, light laughter floating up the hall. That's when the truth hit me so hard I had to sit up. I hadn't been invited to help. I'd been recruited, without pay, without respect, and without choice. It started on a Friday. I woke up with a pounding headache and a sore throat that made it hurt to swallow. My body felt heavy, and every joint ached. I told myself it was just fatigue, and maybe a touch of allergies. After all, I hadn't had a real day off in weeks. I pushed through the morning routine like always, packing lunches, finding missing shoes, and reminding Lacey to grab her homework. By noon, my head was spinning. I sat down for a moment, meaning to rest, but the next thing I knew, an hour had passed. The laundry was still in the washer, the sink full, and the casserole for dinner untouched. When Melvin got home that evening, the first words out of his mouth weren't, "Are you okay?" or "You look pale." They were, "Mom, did something happen? The kids are starving. You usually have dinner ready by now." I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice came out hoarse. I wasn't feeling too well today. I must have dozed off. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You should have told us. The kids need to eat." That was it. No concern. No offer to help. Just an inconvenience to be managed. I nodded, too tired to argue. "There's soup in the pantry," I said softly. He didn't notice the disappointment in my voice. He just went to the kitchen and started heating it up. Stephanie came in a few minutes later, talking about some big project at work. She glanced at me briefly. "You okay, Carol? You look tired." "I am," I admitted. "Well, make sure you get some rest," she said, already moving toward the dining table. "We've got a crazy week coming up." And just like that, the conversation ended. I sat there at the edge of the couch, watching them eat dinner I didn't have the energy to prepare. They didn't even notice I hadn't joined them. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock. I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had cracked. It wasn't anger, it was something quieter, heavier. I picked up my journal from the nightstand and began to write. My hands trembled slightly as I put the words down. I raised a son who sees me as a service, not a soul. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Writing it made it real. I thought about all the years I had spent putting Melvin first, late nights studying with him, extra shifts at the hospital to pay for his school trips, the times I skipped vacations so he could have new cleats or a computer. I had done it out of love, not expecting repayment, but I never thought that love would someday turn into expectation. Now, my kindness wasn't a gift. It was a duty. The next morning, I woke up feeling worse. Fever, chills, and an ache that ran deep into my bones. I stayed in bed, hoping someone would check on me. No one did. By noon, I heard Stephanie calling from downstairs. "Carol, are you doing laundry today? The kids need uniforms for Monday." I didn't even have the strength to answer. She eventually came up to my room, peeked in, and frowned. "Oh, you're still in bed. Are you sick?" "I think I have a fever," I whispered. She looked uncomfortable. "Oh dear. Maybe just rest then. I'll order takeout for tonight." That was it. No offer of tea, no check of my temperature, no sense of care. Just mild inconvenience. Later, I heard laughter from downstairs. Melvin had come home, and they were talking about weekend plans. The sound of it, so carefree, so normal, felt strange to me. My world had stopped for a moment, but theirs hadn't skipped a beat. By Sunday, I felt a little better. I forced myself out of bed and went downstairs. The kitchen looked like a storm had hit it, dirty dishes everywhere, crumbs on the counter, sticky spots on the floor. Melvin smiled when he saw me. "Hey, Mom, feeling better?" "A little," I said quietly. "Good," he said. "We really missed your cooking this weekend." That line hit harder than I expected. Missed my cooking, not missed me. I looked at him for a long moment, searching for the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. I couldn't find him. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of ginger tea. The house was silent except for the sound of the dishwasher. I stared at the apron hanging on the chair, the one with flowers that Stephanie had given me. It used to make me smile. Now it just reminded me of everything I'd given up, my independence, my peace, my time. I thought about calling a friend from Atlanta, maybe venting about it all. But I stopped. What would I say? That I'd become an unpaid employee in my son's house. That my love had been turned into a service plan. Instead, I reached for my phone and opened my contacts. My eyes stopped on a familiar name. Janine, my old colleague from the hospital. She had left nursing years ago to start a nanny placement agency in Dallas. She'd once told me, "Good care deserves good pay. Carol, don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise." I smiled faintly at the memory. My thumb hovered over her number. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say yet. Maybe I wasn't even ready to say it out loud. But I knew one thing, something had to change. I couldn't keep pouring from an empty cup, pretending it was love when it had turned into obligation. So I made a quiet decision right there at that kitchen table. Just one small change for now. A call to someone who still treated caregiving as work, not a favor to be exploited. I didn't know what that call would lead to, but for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt a flicker of control returning. And that tiny flicker was enough to keep me going. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table after everyone had left. The silence felt heavier than usual, but it was exactly what I needed. I looked at my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't said out loud in years, Janine Wallace. Janine and I had worked side by side at the hospital for nearly 20 years. I was the calm one in the pediatric wing, and she was the organizer who could turn chaos into order. After retiring from nursing, she started a professional nanny and home care agency in Dallas. I remembered her telling me once, "Good caregiving should never come free. Carol, it's skilled work, not a favor." I took a deep breath and pressed call. "Carol Wilson," she said when she answered, her voice still carrying that same brisk warmth. "Well, this is a surprise. How are you?" "I'm surviving," I said. "Actually, I need to ask you something. It's a bit of a strange question." "Try me," she replied. "If someone were to hire a full-time nanny, live-in, cooking, cleaning, errands, childcare, what would that cost for, say, 2 months?" She paused for a second. "For your situation, assuming 2 kids and full coverage, about $9,800. That's with insurance, certification, everything. Why do you ask? Are you looking to help someone hire?" I let out a small laugh. "No, Janine. I think I already have. I just didn't know I'd taken the job." She didn't need more explanation. She'd heard stories like mine before. "Carol," she said gently, "if you're doing that kind of work, you're basically running a household. Don't let them treat it like charity. That's not family help. That's unpaid labor." Her words hit me right in the chest. "Thanks, Janine," I said quietly. "You've just helped me more than you know." We chatted a bit more, catching up on old hospital stories, but my mind was elsewhere. When I hung up, I opened the small notebook I used to keep for recipes and started a new list. Hours worked, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, sometimes later. Meals cooked, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Laundry loads, at least 4 per week. Errands, school drop-offs, ballet pickups, grocery runs, dry cleaning. As I wrote, the number of unpaid hours stared back at me. I began adding up the value line by line, week by week. After just 1 month, I'd already crossed Janine's number. It wasn't about money. It was about fairness. They thought of me as help, but I was handling the work of a full-time professional. Only difference was I wasn't being respected or paid for it. That week, I started noticing everything differently. When Stephanie handed me a to-do list, I kept it. When Melvin said, "Can you just watch the kids tonight? We'll be late," I made a note of the hours. Even the smallest requests went into that notebook. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was clarity. I had spent years equating love with sacrifice. But sacrifice without appreciation isn't love. It's servitude. One evening, while Stephanie and Melvin were at a dinner event, I sat at the kitchen counter going through my notes. Lacey came in and asked, "Grandma, why are you writing so much?" I smiled. "I'm keeping track of all the things I do, so I don't forget." She nodded thoughtfully. "Mom does that for work sometimes. She says people need to see what she's worth." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. When she ran off, I closed the notebook and smiled. Exactly. People needed to see what I was worth. A few days later, during breakfast, Stephanie mentioned that her company was offering a family appreciation week. "It's supposed to help us focus on gratitude and balance," she said while scrolling through her emails. "We have to write about who helps us most at home." Melvin grinned. "You should write about Mom. She's been holding this house together." Stephanie laughed. "I might, but technically, I don't think she counts. She's family." That word, technically, stuck to me all morning like a bad taste. Later that afternoon, I sat in the car waiting for the kids at school pickup. I thought about all the times I'd told myself, "This is temporary. They'll realize how much you do." But they hadn't. They wouldn't. Not unless I showed them. That night, after the kids went to bed, I emailed Janine. If I needed to hire a certified nanny, full-time, live-in, Could you arrange that within a week? Her reply came within minutes. Easily. I have someone available now. Young, experienced, excellent with kids. Name's Alyssa. But may I ask, Carol, are you planning to replace yourself? I stared at the screen, smiling faintly. Something like that. I typed back. Over the next few days, I worked quietly. I didn't complain, didn't hint, didn't argue. I just kept my notes and made my preparations. When I wasn't cooking or cleaning, I was going through the paperwork Janine had sent me, employment agreement, background check, salary terms. Alyssa's credentials were impressive. She had CPR certification, early education experience, and a soft approach with children. Exactly the kind of professional any family would be lucky to have. I called Janine once more to confirm. I'll cover the deposit. I told her I just need her here for the first day to meet them. Janine chuckled. Carol Wilson, are you about to teach someone a lesson? Not a lesson, I said, just a little accounting. By the end of the week, my notebook was full. I had documented every hour since the day I arrived. If I had been charging standard rates, the total came out to just over $10,200. $10,000. I looked at that number and thought about every night I had gone to bed sore. Every morning I'd woken up early to do it all over again. I thought about the jokes, the thank yous, the offhand comments about saving money. For the first time in months, I didn't feel tired. I felt focused. I folded the notebook closed, placed it inside my purse, and wrote one final note to myself on the last page. If they saw me as help, I'd make sure they finally knew what help really costs. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was recognition. And soon, they were going to get both, served to them as neatly as the dinners I'd been cooking every night. The week after I finished my notes, I felt lighter. I still did my chores, still took care of the kids, still smiled at breakfast, but inside I knew something was shifting. I had a plan, and it gave me peace. One morning, while the kids were eating cereal and Melvin was rushing out the door, I spoke up casually. Melvin, could I talk to you for a second? He stopped mid-step. Sure, Mom. What's up? I need to go back to Atlanta next week, I said. I have some medical checkups scheduled. It's been a while since my last visit, and I can't put it off anymore. He frowned. Next week? For how long? A few weeks, maybe longer, I said. Depends on what my doctor says. He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, that's kind of sudden. What about the kids? You know we both work full-time. I know, I said calmly. Don't worry. I've already taken care of that part. He blinked. What do you mean? I've arranged for a professional replacement. Her name's Alyssa. She'll start the day I leave. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he chuckled, as if he thought I was joking. A replacement? Mom, you don't have to do that. We can figure something out. Melvin, I said, looking him in the eye, you already did figure something out. You hired me without asking. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's not what this is. Isn't it? I interrupted gently. You and Stephanie needed full-time help. I gave you that help. Now, you'll have someone trained and ready to do the same job, properly compensated. Stephanie walked into the kitchen, right then, purse on her shoulder, coffee in hand. What's going on? Mom says she's going back to Atlanta next week. Melvin said, still sounding uncertain. Stephanie looked surprised. Oh, everything okay? Just health checkups, I said. And don't worry. I've arranged for a nanny to step in. Her name's Alyssa. She'll be here on Monday morning. Stephanie blinked. A nanny? You didn't need to do that. We can manage. I smiled. I know you'll try. But let's be honest, you needed help. Now you'll have it. The following Monday arrived faster than I expected. I woke early, dressed neatly, and packed my things. My suitcase stood by the door. the same one I brought from Atlanta 2 months ago. Only this time it felt lighter. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Stephanie called from the kitchen. "Can you get that, Carol?" I walked to the door and opened it. There stood Alyssa, a young woman in her late 20s, wearing a crisp polo with the logo of Janine's agency embroidered on the chest. Her hair was tied neatly back, and she carried a binder and a confident smile. "Mrs. Wilson," she said warmly, "I'm Alyssa. Janine sent me." "Come in," I said. "They've been expecting you." Behind me, I heard Stephanie's footsteps. She froze when she saw Alyssa. "Oh, hi," Stephanie said, her voice uncertain. "Can I help you?" Alyssa extended her hand politely. "Good morning. I'm the new nanny." Mrs. Wilson said I'd be starting today. Melvin appeared next, tie slightly crooked, clearly confused. "The new nanny?" I gestured toward Alyssa. "Yes, this is the person you should have hired from the start." Stephanie looked from me to Alyssa, then back again. "Carol, we can't afford a full-time nanny right now." "Of course you can," I said evenly. "You've already had one, you just didn't pay her." That silenced them both. Alyssa remained professional, pretending not to notice the tension. She opened her binder and began explaining her schedule, her training, and her responsibilities. She spoke clearly, like someone who knew her worth. "I'll handle school pickups, meal prep, light housekeeping, and bedtime routines," she said. "Janine has already sent over the contract and payment details." Stephanie's mouth fell open slightly. "Payment details?" "Yes," Alyssa said, still smiling. "Mrs. Wilson mentioned that she's been handling these duties for 2 months. So the invoice reflects the standard rate for full-time live-in care during that period." Melvin looked at me, eyes wide. "Invoice." I reached into my bag, pulled out the printed document, and handed it to him. "That's what 2 months of professional help looks like on paper." He stared at the total, $9, $800, then at me. "Mom, this is accurate." I finished. "You've had full-time care, meals service, transportation, and house management. That's the going rate. Don't worry, I'm not charging you. I just wanted you to know what you've been taking for granted." Stephanie was speechless. Her hands fidgeted with her coffee mug, eyes darting from me to the invoice. "Carol, we never meant." "I know," I said. "You didn't mean to. That's the problem. You didn't think at all." Melvin's voice softened. "Mom, you could have just said something." "I did," I said quietly, "in small ways. You just didn't listen." Alyssa shifted politely, waiting for the right moment to leave the room. "Should I start with the kids' morning routine?" she asked. Stephanie nodded slowly. "Yes, please." As Alyssa went upstairs to introduce herself to the children, Melvin sat down, still holding the invoice. His face had gone pale, like he'd just seen something he couldn't unsee. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "I am," I said. "My flight's this afternoon." He nodded, still stunned. "And Alyssa, she's really staying?" "For as long as you need her," I said. "Janine's agency will handle everything. You'll get the help you need. This time, fairly." Stephanie took a long breath. "Carol, you've made your point." "It's not about a point," I said. "It's about perspective." The kids came downstairs soon after, excited to meet Alyssa. They liked her immediately. She had that kind of warmth children recognize. Watching them, I felt a strange mix of pride and relief. They would be fine. Melvin stood by the door as I wheeled my suitcase out. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know what to say." I gave him a small smile. "Then don't say anything. Just think about it." Stephanie came closer. "You really did all this just to teach us a lesson?" "No," I said, "to remind you of one." They both looked down, speechless. Before either of them could thank me or argue, I handed Melvin the printed invoice. He took it, still staring at the numbers. And as I turned toward the door, I added softly, "That's the value of what I've been giving you. The next time you call it help, remember what help really costs." Then I walked out, leaving behind 2 stunned adults and a new nanny who knew exactly what her time was worth. And before they could thank me, I handed them the printed invoice and watched their faces turn the color of cold coffee. By the time my flight landed back in Atlanta, I had already turned off my phone. I needed silence, not apologies, not explanations, just quiet. I sat by the window in my small apartment that night, sipping tea and letting the weight of everything sink in. For the first time in 2 months, I was surrounded by peace. No footsteps, no children's cries, no lists waiting on the counter. That peace lasted exactly 1 day. The following evening, my phone started buzzing. Melvin's name flashed across the screen again, and again until I finally picked up. His voice came through tight and angry. "Mom, what the hell was that? You blindsided us. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I didn't raise my voice. "Welcome to my world, Melvin. I've been humiliated quietly for weeks." He was silent for a moment, then started again. "We had no idea you felt that way. You could have just told us instead of making a scene. Hiring that nanny, giving us an invoice. What were you trying to prove?" "I wasn't trying to prove anything," I said. "I was showing you the truth. You treated me like a convenience, not a person. You didn't ask, you assumed. You didn't thank me, you depended on me." "Mom, that's not fair," he said, his voice softening. "No," I said. "What wasn't fair was how easily you forgot I have a life too." He sighed heavily. "Steph feels awful about everything." "I'm sure she does," I said, "now that someone is holding her accountable." There was another pause. I wish you'd given us a chance to fix it before doing something so drastic. I gave you many chances. Melvin, you just didn't notice." He didn't respond after that. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the sound of a man realizing he was no longer in control of the story. Finally, he muttered, "I'll call you later," and hung up. The next morning, I woke up to a long text from Stephanie. It started with, "Carol, I'm so sorry," and ended with, "We love you and hope we can move past this." Between those lines were paragraphs of excuses. She mentioned how stressful her job had been, how she never meant to take advantage of me, and how sometimes gratitude doesn't come out right when life gets overwhelming. I read it twice, then put the phone down. It wasn't a bad apology, but it wasn't an honest one either. It sounded like something she'd written to make herself feel better, not to make things right. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my savings account app on my phone. I had a small amount of money I'd been keeping aside for emergencies. For years, I told myself that meant medical bills or car repairs. But as I sat there thinking about the past few months, I realized something. This was an emergency, the slow death of my self-respect. And saving myself counted as a legitimate reason to spend it. So I booked a trip. A week later, I was on a plane to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place I'd always wanted to visit, but never had the time or reason to go. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed light, locked up my apartment, and left. The air in Santa Fe was dry and clear, the kind that makes you breathe a little deeper. I stayed in a small, adobe-style inn on the edge of town. The woman at the front desk handed me the key and said, "Breakfast's at 8. No one here's in a hurry." That was exactly what I needed. No hurry, no pressure, no expectations. The first morning, I took a walk through the art district. I watched painters set up their easels, their colors bright against the red clay buildings. For once, I didn't feel invisible. No one looked at me as someone's mother or someone's grandmother. I was just another woman enjoying the morning. Later, I visited a local market and bought a silver bracelet from a native artisan. He told me the design represented strength and renewal. I smiled and told him, I think I'm in the market for both. That evening, I had dinner alone at a small restaurant that overlooked the desert hills. I ordered something simple, something I didn't have to share with anyone. When the sun began to set, the sky turned a deep orange, and for the first time in years, I felt peace settle into my bones. A few days into my trip, Melvin called again. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail saying he wanted to talk things out. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't need to talk. I needed to feel. Every morning, I woke up early, took long walks, and wrote in my journal. My entries were different now. They weren't filled with frustration or guilt. They were about rediscovery. I am learning to rest without feeling guilty. I don't owe anyone constant sacrifice. I gave enough. Now I get to give to myself. Each page felt lighter than the last. One afternoon, while sitting at a cafe, I overheard two women around my age talking about their grown children. One of them said, "My daughter acts like I'm her safety net, not her mother." The other replied, "They forget we raised them to be independent, not to depend on us forever." I smiled quietly. They didn't know me, but they might as well have been telling my story. On my 6th night in Santa Fe, I sat by the window of my hotel room, watching the moon rise over the mountains. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent for once. I thought about Melvin and Stephanie, about the children I loved, and about how easily I had let my role as caregiver erase who I was. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was relief. I didn't regret helping them, but I regretted losing myself in the process. I had spent most of my adult life caring for others, patients, co-workers, family, and somewhere along the line, I had forgotten how to care for myself. Now, in that quiet hotel room, with no one depending on me, I remembered what freedom felt like. That night, as I turned off the lights and slipped into bed, I didn't think about who needed me tomorrow. I didn't plan breakfast or errands or schedules. For the first time in years, I slept without setting an alarm. The first few mornings in Santa Fe, I did nothing. No lists, no plans, no alarms. I woke up when the sun slipped through the curtains, made myself coffee, and sat by the window watching the sky change colors. I didn't rush to wash dishes or fold laundry. I didn't rush at all. After years of living for everyone else, doing nothing felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable. But little by little, I began to enjoy the stillness. One morning, while walking through the small plaza near my hotel, I heard someone calling my name. "Carol Wilson? It can't be." I turned, and there she was, Rosa Martinez, my old neighbor from Atlanta. I hadn't seen her in nearly 15 years. She'd moved to Santa Fe after her husband passed, chasing her lifelong dream of becoming an artist. "Rosa?" I said, laughing in disbelief. Of all places. She hugged me tight. I always said I'd run into someone from the old neighborhood. "Come, you're having lunch with me." No excuses. At her small studio, walls were filled with bright landscapes and desert scenes. Paint tubes and brushes were scattered everywhere. It smelled of turpentine and coffee, chaotic but full of life. "You painted all this?" I asked, running my hand near one of the canvases. "Every single one," she said, smiling. "This is what retirement looks like when you finally live for yourself." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. She handed me a small blank canvas. "You're painting something today, too." I laughed. "Rosa, I've never painted anything that wasn't a wall." "Perfect," she said. "Walls mean you know how to fill empty space. That's all painting is." So I picked up a brush. The first strokes were awkward, shaky. But soon, the sound of the bristles brushing the canvas began to calm me. I wasn't good, at least not yet, but it didn't matter. It felt freeing just to create something for no reason at all. That afternoon, We walked through the market and had lunch at a cafe near the square. Rosa told me about the local senior socials, potlucks, art fairs, community dance nights. She went to all of them. "You should come," she said. "They're full of women like us. Some divorced, some widowed, some just tired of being taken for granted. You'll fit right in." I hesitated, but she signed me up anyway. "You need people who remind you who you are," she said. The first social I went to was small, maybe 20 people. The women welcomed me with warm smiles and easy conversation. We talked about everything from recipes to travel dreams to grandkids. But unlike most conversations I'd had in the last few years, no one complained about being exhausted or unappreciated. These women were doing things: painting, hiking, learning Spanish, starting online shops. One woman, a retired teacher, said, "My daughter thought I'd babysit full-time when I moved closer. I told her, I raised my kids. Now I'm raising my dreams." That line made everyone laugh, including me. It was exactly how I felt, but hadn't found the words for yet. By the end of the evening, I'd made new friends and felt lighter. For the first time in decades, I didn't introduce myself as Melvin's mom or the kids' grandma. I was just Carol. Days turned into weeks. My walks got longer. My sleep got deeper. I joined Rosa at her art studio twice a week. Sometimes we painted. Other times we just sat and talked. She asked about my family one afternoon as she mixed colors. "Do you miss them?" "Of course," I said, "but I think I miss who I used to be more." Rosa nodded knowingly. "Then keep doing things that make you feel like her again." That night, I wrote in my journal, "I spent 40 years nursing others back to health. It's my turn now." As weeks passed, the ache I'd been carrying inside my chest started to lift. I no longer checked my phone constantly or waited for texts that didn't come. I realized how quiet real peace can be. No guilt, no expectations, no noise. One afternoon, I painted a simple picture of an open window with sunlight streaming in. It wasn't perfect, but it meant something to me. The window symbolized freedom, the ability to breathe on my own terms. Rosa framed it and said, "This belongs on your wall when you go home." Eventually, I did go back to Atlanta, but I returned different. I didn't rush to unpack or catch up on chores. I moved slowly, choosing what I wanted to keep and what needed to go. The house felt like a new space, familiar yet changed. Much like me, I unpacked my small Santa Fe souvenirs, the silver bracelet, the framed painting, and a little ceramic sun I'd bought at a street market. Each one reminded me of what I had reclaimed. Then I opened the drawer where my old apron was folded. I held it for a long moment. It had seen thousands of meals, hundreds of family gatherings, and years of silent work. It was a symbol of love, but also of being taken for granted. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I took a small hook and hung it neatly on the kitchen wall. Not as a reminder of duty, but as a boundary. That apron had served its time. And so had I. As I stepped back and looked at it, sunlight streamed through the window and hit the fabric just right, casting a warm glow across the kitchen. It didn't look like surrender. It looked like peace. And in that moment, I knew I'd never wear it again. It had been nearly 3 months since I came back from Santa Fe. I'd settled into a quiet rhythm, painting in the mornings, meeting friends for coffee, tending to my small garden in the afternoons. I didn't hear much from Melvin or Stephanie during that time. A few texts here and there, mostly about the kids, but nothing deep. I didn't chase it. Silence had become a kind of peace for me. Then one Friday evening, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood Melvin, alone. He looked tired, the kind of tired that goes beyond a lack of sleep. His eyes had that guilty softness I hadn't seen since he was a boy caught doing something wrong. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. Melvin! I nodded, stepping aside. Come in. He walked in slowly, hands in his pockets, looking around my little apartment like it was new to him. Maybe it was. The walls had new paintings now, my paintings. You've been busy, he said, glancing at the canvas on the easel. I replied. It feels good to do something for myself again. He smiled faintly. I can tell. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once written my notes before hiring Alyssa. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled deeply. Mom, I came because I owe you an apology. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. I've had a lot of time to think. He said, after you left, things were rough. Stephanie was angry at first, then embarrassed, but eventually we both realized you were right. We treated you like free labor disguised as love. I looked at him, surprised to hear those words come from his mouth. He went on. We started couples therapy. It was her idea, actually. We were fighting about everything, the house, work, the kids. And one day, the therapist asked who we could rely on for support. We both said your name. And then she asked what we'd given you in return. He looked down at his hands. That's when it hit me. You didn't just help us, you kept us afloat. And we never once stopped to think about what that cost you. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, the way I used to when he was little and trying to tell me the truth after breaking a rule. I kept thinking about that invoice you gave us. He continued. At first, it made me angry. Then I realized it wasn't about the money. It was a mirror. You were showing us what we refused to see. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. I wanted to bring you something. Inside was a photo of my grandchildren, smiling, holding up a sign that said, "We miss you, Grandma." Beneath, it was a handwritten note from Lacey. Alyssa says thank you for helping Mommy and Daddy learn. Melvin smiled weakly. We hired Alyssa full-time, and we pay her. You taught me something I didn't even know I needed to learn, that respect and love aren't the same thing, but they can exist together if you try hard enough. I looked at the picture, my throat tightening. How are the kids? They're good, he said. They still ask about you all the time. Alyssa's great with them, but it's not the same. I smiled softly. It's not supposed to be the same. I'm their grandma, not their nanny. He nodded slowly. I know. I understand that now. He stayed for dinner, simple soup and bread. We talked like people learning to speak again after years of silence. He told me about the therapy sessions, about how Stephanie had admitted she'd been insecure around me for years. She thought she had to compete with you. He said, you were everything she wasn't, steady, patient, dependable. Instead of learning from that, she tried to control it. I don't hate her for that. I said, I just needed her to see me as a person, not a service. He nodded. She's trying. She asked if the kids could visit soon. We wanted to come together, but I thought maybe I should come first. That was wise, I said. I think space was good for all of us. He looked relieved that I wasn't shutting him out. Mom, do you forgive us? I thought for a moment before answering. Yes, I said slowly, but forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. It just means I've stopped carrying the anger. The lesson still stands. He nodded, tears in his eyes. That's fair. The next weekend, he brought the kids. They ran into my arms as soon as they saw me, their little voices filling the apartment with laughter. We spent the day at the park, had ice cream, and painted together on small canvases I bought for them. At one point, Lacey looked up at me and said, Grandma, Mommy says you taught us how to be thankful. I smiled. Maybe I just reminded everyone. When Melvin dropped them off that evening, he hugged me longer than usual. You're still my mom, he whispered. But now I see you as Carol, too, and that's made me a better son. Those words touched me in a way nothing else could. That night, after they left, I walked into my kitchen and looked at the apron hanging on the wall. It was still there, untouched, just as I'd left it. I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come. That apron wasn't a symbol of servitude anymore. It was proof of my boundaries, a quiet reminder that love could exist without sacrifice. I whispered to myself, forgiveness doesn't mean wearing the apron again. It means hanging it up and keeping it there. And I turned off the light, feeling at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally knew where I stood. 6 months later, I found myself on a plane back to Dallas. The last time I'd made this trip, I was tired, overworked, and invisible. This time, I was rested, calm, and curious. Melvin had invited me weeks earlier. "Mom, we'd love to have you visit," he'd said. "Just a visit, no helping, no cooking. We just want to see you." I hesitated at first, but when Lacey's little voice came through the phone shouting, "Grandma, please come. Mommy's making your favorite dinner," I couldn't resist. When I arrived, Melvin was waiting at the airport with flowers. "No suitcases of kids' clothes to carry this time," I joked. He laughed, and for the first time in a long while, it felt easy between us. The drive to their house was peaceful. The same streets, the same big houses, but something felt different. The tension that once filled that home had been replaced with something lighter. When we walked in, Stephanie greeted me at the door wearing an apron. Her apron, not mine. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. "Welcome, Carol," she said, smiling. "Dinner's almost ready. Please just sit and relax." That sentence, "just sit and relax," might have been the most unexpected thing I'd ever heard in that house. The kids ran to me, wrapping their arms around my waist. "Grandma, we helped set the table." Lacey said proudly, "Alyssa taught us how to fold napkins, like restaurants." I smiled and hugged them tighter. Alyssa was still with them. I learned, working part-time now, that Stephanie's job allowed more flexibility. "She's wonderful," Stephanie said. "Hiring her was the best decision we ever made." I nodded. "I'm glad to hear it." Dinner was simple and perfect. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Real, home-cooked food. Stephanie fussed over every detail, checking to make sure I had everything I needed. Melvin poured my wine and even helped clear the table. When we sat in the living room afterward, Lacey handed me a gift bag. "Open it, Grandma." Inside was a framed photo of me sitting between the kids, all three of us smiling in my little Atlanta garden. Across the bottom, in neat handwriting, it said, "Not our nanny, our grandma." My eyes filled with tears before I could stop them. "It was Lacey's idea," Stephanie said softly. "She wanted to make sure you knew how we see you now." I looked at my daughter-in-law and saw something genuine in her eyes, a humility that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You have no idea what that means to me." Melvin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom, I know we can't undo the way things were, but we've learned a lot this past year. We're trying to do better, with each other, with the kids, with you." I smiled. "I can see that." Later that night, after the kids went to bed, Stephanie and I sat at the kitchen table, this time as equals. "I owe you more than an apology," she said. "I owe you gratitude. You showed me something I didn't want to see. I thought asking for help meant losing control, but it was really about learning respect." I looked at her and saw not the defensive woman I once clashed with, but someone trying to grow. "Stephanie," I said gently, "we were both learning." "Me too. I had to learn that helping isn't the same as being needed." I had to remember who I was outside of being someone's mother or grandmother. She nodded. "I guess we both needed a reset." "Yes," I said, smiling. "And we got one." Before I left Dallas, Melvin, and the kids walked me to the car. The sun was just setting, the sky a mix of pink and gold. "Come back soon, Grandma," Eli said, hugging me tight. "I will, I promised. But remember, Grandma's a visitor now, not the housekeeper." Melvin laughed. "We know, Mom." Then, more seriously, he added, "You were right about everything. It took a bill to teach us the value of your time, but it took your silence to teach us the value of your peace." That stayed with me all the way home. Back in Atlanta, I placed the framed photo on my mantel beside my painting of the open window. I looked around my little apartment, quiet, bright mine, and smiled. Family doesn't always change overnight. Sometimes it takes distance, discomfort, and a little tough love to open people's eyes. What mattered now was that they understood. And I finally understood myself, too. I learned that love doesn't mean endless sacrifice. It means showing up in ways that don't erase who you are. As I sat by the window, the evening light falling across the room, I felt a peace I'd never known before. Because sometimes setting a price is the only way to remind them you were never for sale. Now tell me, have you ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Do you think I went too far, or just far enough? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this about strength, love, and learning your worth. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on this next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Her Kindle Stories. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below.